Hey guys, today I want to talk about some of the problems facing the Elemental Shaman in Dragonflight so far. So before I get into this, I really want to hammer home the fact that this is not supposed to be me just complaining or dooming. I'm not a balanced druid. I'm joking, kind of. Anyway, the point is that I'm not trying to be like super negative about this. I want to look at this in a constructive light. So we're kind of like going to break down some things that are wrong and maybe some of the things that can fix it, as well as just some things that I'm not even sure how they could go about fixing it. Because the number one problem that Elemental is facing right now is that it's fun. The fact that the class is fun to play and has a variety of different play styles that can play completely differently from one another is probably its biggest downfall of it getting real changes. So we're going to look at some of those things, some of the easy fixes that I can come up with in the 5 minutes of thinking about it, as well as the more complex problems that are going to take a little bit more thought. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start off with the tree, and we'll just kind of go through a whole bunch of different ones. So if you want to skip around, feel free to look at the chapters below, and you can skip to whatever you feel is most interesting to you. All right, I feel like I need to start off by saying this, but I actually really like this tree. I know that some of you are already probably angry with me for even saying that, but it's true. This tree achieves a lot of the goals that I feel like we should have for every class, which is every single point in this tree is used in some build, with maybe the exception of Astral Wolf Affinity, which is being moved to the class tree anyway. So that's something that should be commended. Like, that's insane that every single one of these points is used somewhere in some build. Not only that, but you have something like the Wildfire build, which is good for AoE and Mythic Plus, but then also you can come over here to something like the Mythic Plus Lightning build, which is a completely different build, uses a completely different side of the tree. You saw how many points were changing in there, but it accomplishes that same goal of having good AoE in a Mythic Plus setting. So when you take that into account, and then you also take into account like the single target build, like this one right here, which goes a little bit more fire, even that looks a little bit different. And then if you've seen on something like on Taros, where people are actually trying to parse now and try to just work on that, you might see something like this, which is way more gambly and kind of, circles around the elephant in the room in terms of what's one of the central problems of the spec that we'll talk about later, but it does give you another way to play in terms of that. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do with this tree and have a completely different play style. But that being said, one of the core issues for Elemental Shaman is needing to choose between single target and AoE. That's something that has been an issue the entire time, and it's only exacerbated as the weeks go on and people get more gear. Elemental has fallen further and further and further behind. So let's talk about the Wildfire build, just as an example. If you wanted to get more single target, you can take a point out of, say, Searing Flames like this and put it into Elemental Blast. I know that people like Petco would say that you absolutely don't need to do that, but that is one thing that you can absolutely do, or you can change out Splintered Elements for Primordial Surge if you want to even go further down into that single target path. But the problem is you're having to give up so much. That's a ton of haste you have to give up, and Searing Flames and Mass AoE does a ton of work of building Maelstrom for your Earthquakes. So every decision that you make takes away something from your purpose of for a Wildfire build being good in Mythic Plus, takes away part of that synergy for being able to do good AoE. If you look at a class like Enhance, you don't even have to look at a different class. Just look at the same class but different spec. Enhance doesn't have to have those issues. If you look at, say, if we go over here and we can just go ahead and change to Enhance. If you look at their single target and their AoE builds, they look completely different. However, it's the performance that isn't that difference. So this is something this is what you would be running on, say, Dathia, where you're going to have ads that are going to be a focus and you need to kill them really quickly. And this is also something that you might see in a Mythic Plus setting. Of course, you might actually add in Crash Lightning, you might add in Crashing Storms, but you would just kind of take these 2 points out and put them over here, or as you can see, undid my tree, but you get the idea. You can move 1 or 2 points and kind of tailor make with just 1 or 2 point changes without having to feel like you're losing too much and still get good results. So the idea that something like Dathia, where you're basically only having a couple instances of AoE or even just a second target, this is still pretty geared to an AoE setting, but you're using it for a setting that is mostly single target. Whereas you compare that to something like the full single target build for Enhance, which really forgoes a lot of that AoE ability to get even more into DRE and to Thorm's Invocation, where this will get you a lot more single target damage. It's not so much more that you're feeling like you're having to actually lose single target when you're using the the other build. So like they're closer together. Like, yes, you can like invest heavily on one side, but you're not really losing too much when you then take some of those points out for the single target and then put them into AoE. So that build, as I was showing you before, like this one here, or if you even take out Elemental Blast and Storm's Wrath and then put them into here, kind of just comes straight down here like this, and points here, 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 and here. This build here for Mythic Plus, really good for AoE, but you're not losing too much in that single target sense. So again, going back to Elemental, we're even just pulling 1 point away because our single target damage is already not very good, really hurts us just that much more. We need these synergies. We need these synergies such as Searing Flames to prop up some of that damage in AoE. Like, I would say that this is a fine build to take into Mythic Plus even on fortified weeks, but the problem is that this ability is doing absolutely nothing for like 90% of the dungeon. So why would you want to take it? You just keep it in Searing Flames and just commit to just doing less damage on bosses during fortified weeks. It's much more complicated in tyrannical weeks where you actually feel like you need to have that damage for bosses, but do you really want to give up that AoE out of that Searing Flames? I mean, it is tyrannical, so you're going to be able to pull more mobs, so you'll be able to do more damage in AoE. It's just one of those things that it just kind of cascades on itself. But the thing that's really at the root of the problem is that we just don't do a lot of single target damage, even when we build full on into single target. So the big takeaway here is all the best classes, all the meta classes are able to do AoE and single target at the same time without feeling like they're giving up too much of anything, really. They can take everything that they need, maybe even then some, and still perform at a decent level for both AoE and single target, which is just not the same for Elemental. We just have to give up too much. But a big way that we could fix this, and what my biggest suggestion to Blizzard, if you want to take the 5-minute approach to fixing this situation we're in, the 5-minute approach is buff Earthshock by like 50% and buff Elemental Blast by like 25% or even more, or something comparable to keep it in line. The problem with that would then become that Elemental Blast just becomes too good to ignore, and that Searing Flames would then probably never get taken at that point, even in fortified weeks, because then you would just be putting yourself with Elemental Blast just does so much damage you just can't ignore it. So it would make this tree unbalanced. You'd probably kill off Searing Flames, but it would allow us to at least be competitive alongside some of those other classes. Again, like, I'm not trying to say that it needs to be like one of the top classes, but you can look at Elemental in terms of like just pure single target and see that there's something wrong across all of the raid builds right now. There's like, even anytime there's a single target fight, Elemental's usually close to the bottom, even if they're going into the full gambling spec with Further Beyond. So with that being said, like, that is the easiest approach, but if you want to be like creative about it, it's going to take a lot more to fix. Something else that I really want to talk about is this elephant in the room, which is DRE. Too much of our single target damage, it's too tied into deeply rooted elements. Deeply rooted elements has just caused too many issues, in my opinion, at this point. It's very feast or famine. If you can get these procs, you will do insane amounts of damage, especially in a Mythic Plus setting. I know, especially at the high end, if you're looking like the top 25 Elemental Shamans in the world, a lot of them start preaching that Chain Lightning is a more consistent approach and not to be worrying about using Lava Burst in AoE as much. But if you do use Lava Burst and AoE, then when you get these things to proc, your damage can go insane, especially then being able to transfer that into Lava Beam and do even more damage out of those Chain Lightnings or now Lava Beams that will do even more damage. So the feast or famine nature of deeply rooted elements hurts us in single target because it's going to hurt from a balancing perspective, as well as it hurts us a little bit in AoE as well. I don't really know what to do with this ability because it is fun. If you like the gambling playstyle, if you like those dopamine hits when these things trigger, it's a very fun playstyle. However, it's just so unreliable, and even when you can get the perfect lineup, even when you can have insane luck like Katma has had, where he's been in Ascendance with the Further Beyond build, and he's been in it for like almost like, I don't know, it's like 70% of the fight on Taros, and he's still like way down below, like somewhere in the middle range for DPS, and you're having to get like absolute insane god proc type luck, which is just not the norm at all. I don't know. Deeply rooted elements needs to be fixed in some way, but I don't know what the solution is. On the same sense there, Ascendance is horribly underpowered right now. A 3-minute baseline cooldown, but it needs to have the Oath of the Farseer and Further Beyond to actually be like really useful in most situations. You need to have that cooldown reduction. You can get it down an entire minute by investing 2 points into Oath of the Farseer, while on top of that getting an extra 15% haste while you're in Ascendance. And then on top of that, Further Beyond helps you keep yourself in Ascendance even longer. But even then, that's a 2-minute cooldown that is being dwarfed by DRE, which even if it procs twice, it has basically gotten more value than what Ascendance will get on its own. Because not only, yes, it's only 12 seconds instead of 15 seconds, but with even those 2 procs, you're getting them to trigger twice, meaning that you're getting that initial lava burst from it triggering to happen 2 different times, which more than covers the fact that you only got 2 procs in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, depending on how you're comparing it. So DRE is just overpowering Ascendance in every single metric, even when you're like putting up against Oath of the Farseer and Further Beyond. If you look at things like Taros, they're still running DRE and just hoping for luck. They're not taking Ascendance, they're still taking DRE. So Ascendance is one of the biggest issues. DRE is also one of the biggest issues. Something needs to be changed in this part of the tree here so that we can actually get some real value that's more consistent. I don't know what the solution is here. I really don't. Some people would say just buff the proc chance on DRE, but is that going to actually save us? You're still going to run into situations where it's that feast or famine. If they do buff it, then they'd probably put some sort of cap on how often it can trigger within a certain amount of time. Do we want that to happen? I don't know. I feel like just too much of our gameplay right now is centered around these lava burst chains going off, getting into Ascendance several times in a row, and basically just carrying us from those situations. The other thing is, like, if you're actually getting those procs and getting that really, really good luck, then your gameplay just devolves into only pressing lava burst over and over and over again and ignoring everything else, except if you have Elemental Blast. If you have Elemental Blast, that's your only reprieve. You can press that and it becomes a 2-button rotation. Something needs to be fixed with deeply rooted elements, and I do not know what a good solution is. This is something where I'm offering a criticism, but I don't have a solution. I really don't. I don't know what a good solution to be with that. If you have any solutions, if you think of something that you think would actually work, feel free to let me know in the comments, or let them know on the official forums as well, because that's where they're actually going to hear it, especially on the PTR forums right now. That's where they're going to be listening the most. So if you have any thoughts that would be a good solution to this, feel free to either put them in my comments or in the PTR forums as well. But that being said, I personally don't know what the solution is here, but I feel like something needs to change. Couple of other miscellaneous issues are things like spreading Flame Shock and how much you're needing to take Liquid Magma Totem just to do these things. And Liquid Magma Totem only spreads it to 3 targets. Why is it only 3? Why can't it be everything that it hits? When you look at something like Enhance that can spread it easily with Lashing Flames, which only has a 10-second cooldown, which of course it never is, because, you know, even with Molten Assault, you're almost always going to be running Hot Hands and Ashen Catalyst, so you're never getting that full 10 seconds, or most of the time you're never going to see that. So you can spread it over and over again, but that doesn't have a cap on how many it can spread to. It can always go up to the cap of 6, and that's how many Flame Shocks you can have total, with just one button that's not on this long cooldown. Liquid Magma Totem is a 1-minute cooldown and only spreads it to 3, which basically forces you into taking Totemic Recall and its child node, Call of the Elements, so that you can reset the cooldown on Liquid Magma Totem, which is almost always a 4-point investment if you want to get down here, because there's not really a reason to take Go with the Flow. Most of the time you don't need that 10-second reduction, so you're having to invest 4 points on the class tree just to get down here, just so you can get in a reset on a 1-minute cooldown, but then that resets 2 minutes. So it's like you have to invest so many points just to get your Flame Shock spreading to work. Yes, it helps out to have things like Surge of Power and spreading Flame Shocks that way, but it takes so much more setup than even Enhance has to do, but we get so much more benefit out of it in terms of our, just like the way that our playstyle, it's much more centered around needing to get those Flame Shocks spread for things like Searing Flames or for DREs and stuff like that. So it's just something that the easiest fix here is reduce it to 30 seconds and make it spread to everything. You put it down once, it hits anything it hits, up to your target cap of 6. We can, the whole discussion on if it should be higher than 6, I don't want to have that discussion right now. It probably could go up to 8 or something like that, or just make it unlimited and then adjust the damage from there. But let's not talk about that right now. Let's keep it in the bounds of reality. But there's no reason why this shouldn't spread to 6 targets. I don't understand the need to have needing to have like 2 liquid magma totems, for mass AoE, or just like having to work so much, putting down the liquid magma totem, lining up your surge of power with your flame shock and then your primordial wave just to get to 6 targets. It's so much extra work than what an enhance has to do. I would like to have something that makes us feel a little bit more in line with even our sister spec. So like that's a big thing there that I would like to see changed. Another thing is if you're in the single target spec and you're running something like this, where you're running Primordial Surge and you're running Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence, if you're running this version of the single targets build, Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence and Primordial Surge have such bad synergy because of the fact that you're almost always going to be in a situation where after you use your Primordial Wave, that you're going to be needing to use your Elemental Blast or your Earth Shock at some point soon because you're getting all that Maelstrom, which means that you're going to be overlapping the Primordial Surge with your Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence after you're using your Elemental Blast. So you're like in this situation where you're constantly munching procs, in a world where we don't want to be doing that. We want to be getting out as many as we can. There's just bad synergy with that. Another issue, again, I'm just going to roll them out here because I don't really have solutions for them either, is like Icefury. Icefury is one of my favorite abilities in the game, conceptually wise. I fell in love with it during BFA when it was just Icefury, and I know a lot of people really don't like it. It's very divisive, but where it is right now, it just feels very unimportant, even with these child nodes. In a build like this, it's such an afterthought. It's what you use when you're not pressing Lava Burst or Elemental Blast. If you have nothing else to press, then we press our Icefury, and even then we're not really caring about the flux melting aspect of it, even though I like the idea of it. On the other side of things, like with the Electrified Shocks version of it, it's just fallen off so much in terms of damage. It needs a bonus in damage too. Yes, you are getting the bonus of the nature damage as well as being able to hit 4 targets, but it's still falling off in damage. You're not really using it that much, and you definitely don't need to be using it in mass AoE situations. So it's just like it needs some more oomph there. Icefury has just like really, really fallen off the rails in that regard. And the last thing I keep coming back to all the time is defensives. Like, we only have Astral Shift. We need something more than just that. Like, yes, it's a very good cooldown. It does what it does really well, but we have nothing else to cover anything outside of Astral Shift. Like, someone mentioned the other day to me that, like, yes, but we do have Spirit Wolf. It's like, yes, but Spirit Wolf takes 4 seconds to get going for only a 20% damage reduction. Like, what are you gonna, you're just gonna sit there for 4 seconds and then 20% is gonna somehow make that difference? Having to sit still for that long and just do nothing is just not a good defensive. And then you have something like Earth Elemental, which is a 5-minute cooldown, only giving you 15% additional health. For a DPS, 15% is just not enough to make it like really super useful. And in like a Mythic Plus setting, you need to be using Earth Elemental for something other than a personal defensive. Like, Brimming with Life is a really good addition. I'm glad we have it. I'm glad that it can recover our reincarnation. Sometimes we get 2 uses in a dungeon if the dungeon isn't going well. But every time that you have to use it, you're sacrificing 8% of your maximum health. That needs to be decoupled. That should not be only while it's on cooldown. Just like 8% additional health would be nice to just always have as a reliability, but we still need something else on top of this. I think the easiest fix is just giving us a second charge of Astral Shift so that while we use one, we have another one as backup that we can use for something else. Like Herja, you can use it on, like, you'd be able to use it on all 3. That would at least give us something to do and have something usable to cover those periods of damage. But that's the easiest solution that I could have, is just give us a second charge. If they want to be creative and give us something else, by all means, but we need to have something more than that, especially when in 10.0.7 comes out and we're losing Swirling Maelstrom doing what it does now to basically doing nothing at all. We're going to need something else with our healing kind of getting nerfed there. So I don't know. That situation is only getting worse in 10.0.7 unless they give us another charge of Astral, which is what I hope for, but we can't speculate because they haven't mentioned anything like that. So that's just another big hole that we have right now. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is stats, but I don't want to get too deep into it. Just the whole idea about how Lava Bursts get value out of Mastery, but get no value whatsoever out of Critical Strike because they're already critting on every single attack because you always are going to have a Flame Shock up. So Mastery is always going to be better for Lava Burst, which is what we're doing a lot of the time in single target. But for AoE, you're going to get more value out of Crit Strike because of Earthquake and because of Chain Lightning. And that's not even to talk about the fact that Chain Lightning isn't even getting the full value out of your Mastery stat because there's a hidden modifier that prevents it from getting the full value of your mastery. I don't want to talk about that too much. It's not really necessary to talk about either. Just the idea that Crit Strike is really good for AoE and Mastery is really good for single target, and they're both bad in the opposite. The time where Elemental was actually at its best was during BFA, in my opinion. I think the times between 8.1 and 8.2 were the golden era for Elemental Shaman. We were able to basically put all of our points into crit and haste because of how Icefury worked in single target, and because you got so much extra value out of like your Icefury, and your Lightning Bolt could still crit. Crit was still better than Mastery for single target, and then it obviously was better in AoE as well. So our builds were much more succinct in being able to just gear for the same thing. So that's one thing that I just really wish they could change and fix somehow. Maybe give Chain Lightning back that value in Mastery, but even then, crit would still always be better for AoE. So that's, again, a smaller problem overall, but it's a lingering one that does have lasting effects into how you're even gearing your class. So I do feel like it's worth mentioning. But that's about everything I wanted to talk about today. I feel like I've covered most of my bases. I could ramble forever, but that really wouldn't be very productive. So with that being said, I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think Elemental needs? What do you think some changes that would be helpful, or just what are your ideas and thoughts? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, as well as if you're really passionate about it, feel free to go over to the PTR forums. There's a post by Seeward who has already started the discussion going there. Leave a response to there to just kind of keep that thread bumped up and get more replies to it. You know, just make sure that we're keeping it civil. Let's not be like throwing chairs or yelling at the devs. You know, we're not balanced druids. I'm joking. Kind of. Anyway, that's just about it for today. I stream at Twitch at twitch.tv/Ridmark, so feel free to give me a follow there if you want to come see me live and push keys and do the best I can with Elemental. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, but other than that, I will see you next time.